If you're a federal employee in your 50s or early 60s, claiming Social Security at 62 probably feels safe. It kind of feels like you're locking something in before the rules change. But for federal retirees, that decision doesn't just shrink your check, it can quietly cut your spouse's future income, shrink your tax planning window, and limit what you can safely do with your TSP. I've seen couples give up tens of thousands of dollars this way without even realizing it. And most people never connect that back to how Social Security interacts with your FERS pension. So we're going to fix that today. I'm Tom, owner of GT Wealth, and I work specifically with federal employees who are within about 5 to 10 years of retirement. And I could tell you this, the Social Security decision is rarely just about Social Security alone. It's more about how it plugs into your pension, your TSP, and your spouse's income. So in this video, I'll show you why the generic always claim at 62 or always wait until 70 advice breaks down for federal employees, the 3 levers that actually matter for feds, when 62 does make sense, and the one situation where delaying Social Security can become one of the most powerful gifts you leave your spouse. And stay with me because before we're done, I'll show the tax window most federal retirees completely miss when they claim too early. So let's start with why federal employees are different in the first place. Most Social Security advice assumes a very simple picture. You retire, you live off your investments, and Social Security becomes your main guaranteed income source. But that's not you. As a federal employee, you already have a FERS pension, possibly the FERS supplement, a TSP balance, FEHB decisions to make, and Medicare timing to coordinate. So your retirement isn't a 2-legged stool. It actually has at least 3 legs. And when one leg changes height, like starting Social Security early, the balance starts to shift. So this isn't just a 62 versus 70 question. It's really, how does Social Security plug into the rest of our retirement? That's the part most people miss. So if you're watching generic Social Security videos that never mention FERS, the supplement, or the TSP, just know they're not really talking about your situation. I want to keep this simple and break it down into 3 levers. The first lever is income timing. If your pension already covers your core living expenses, then Social Security at 62 usually isn't a need, it's a preference. And that matters because once it's a preference, you're playing a strategy game, not a survival game. And unfortunately, strategy mistakes don't show up right away. They usually stay hidden for 10 or 20 years. So if you don't actually need the income yet, claiming early means you're permanently trading away a larger guaranteed check you could have later. Now, this is where people usually push back. They'll say something like, take it at 62 and just invest it because the government might cut benefits anyway. And I can see that can be a strong argument, and I get why it feels safer and smarter to do. But here's the other side to that. If you want to invest the difference, that's great in theory, but I found in real life and in most plans I see, that extra money doesn't just sit invested perfectly for 30 years. Why? Because life happens, right? Cars break down, your kids need help, home projects come up, there's always going to be something. So if you don't need the income, what you're really doing is voluntarily locking in a smaller inflation-adjusted lifetime benefit, one that may also reduce your surviving spouse's protection. And remember, most federal retirees already have a fairly conservative portfolio. The I'll invest it and beat the delay credit strategy rarely plays out as cleanly as it sounds on paper. This is where we start to see the cracks in those cookie cutter always claim at 62 rules. The second lever is spouse protection. This is the one almost nobody talks about. For married couples, the higher earner Social Security benefit often becomes the survivor benefit. So if you're the higher earner and you claim early, you're basically choosing a smaller survivor check for your spouse on purpose in exchange for a little more income for you now. So you're not just reducing your own check, you're reducing your spouse's potential lifetime income, sometimes for 20 years or more. And when we run these projections, this is usually the moment couples sit back and they say, oh, I didn't even think about that. Because at that point, delaying the larger check isn't just about the math, it becomes a form of legacy planning. And this is where the blanket statement, always claim at 62 advice, really falls apart for married federal couples, especially when there's clearly one higher earner. The third lever is taxes and TSP strategy. Now, this is the advanced piece, but I'll keep it simple. If you delay Social Security, you often create a window in your 60s where your taxable income is lower. And in those lower income years, you can do things like Roth conversions, strategic TSP withdrawals, and capital gain harvesting. That window can dramatically reduce your lifetime tax bill. If you claim Social Security early, that window starts to shrink. Now, is that automatically wrong? Of course not. But if you don't even look at it, you're guessing. And I've watched people accidentally push themselves into higher tax brackets in their 70s and 80s because they didn't use that planning window when they had it. Let's look at 3 examples. The first is a single FERS employee with a modest TSP and reasonably good health. For this person, delaying Social Security often works like longevity insurance, meaning you're protecting yourself against living a long time well into your 80s and 90s. Claiming early might feel like a good idea in the short term, but it can reduce your income in those later years when you may need it the most. So if this sounds like you, delaying at least part of your benefit is usually worth running the numbers on. The second example is a married couple where you're the higher earner with a larger pension and your spouse has little or no Social Security of their own. This is where delaying can become very powerful because you're increasing the survivor benefit, right? If you claim at 62 in this situation, you might be fine, but you're taking a real risk of locking in a smaller check for your spouse down the road. So if this is your household, you should almost never make these decisions without seeing the survivor projection numbers laid out first. The third example is someone with a large TSP who wants to do an aggressive Roth conversion strategy in their 60s. In that case, delaying Social Security can create a really valuable tax window because your income is lower, which can make conversions and strategic withdrawals much more efficient. But if you claim early, that window shrinks. So if you've talked about Roth conversions at all, but you're also planning to claim at 62, those two goals might actually be working against each other. That's a scenario that almost always is worth your time exploring in more detail. Now, let's be fair, there are legitimate reasons to claim at 62. If your first pension doesn't fully cover the essential bills and taking Social Security is the difference between paying the mortgage and keeping the lights on, that's a strong case for starting earlier. Or if you have serious health concerns or shorter life expectancy, getting more years of smaller checks can absolutely be the better trade-off. And if your TSP is relatively limited and the only way to delay would be to aggressively drain it, then using Social Security earlier to take pressure off your investments can also be a very smart move. So in those kinds of situations, claiming at 62 can make sense. What doesn't make sense though, at least in my opinion, is claiming early without running your numbers and understanding the trade-offs. That's the big difference. Now, let's zoom back out to that tax window we've been hinting at, because this is where a lot of federal retirees get blindsided. Between the day you retire and the day required minimum distributions kick in, you may have a handful of years where you can actually control your tax bracket. If Social Security hasn't started yet, your taxable income can be much lower than it will be later. And in that window, you can move money from TSP or IRAs into Roth at deliberately chosen tax rates. You can trim down future RMDs so they don't explode your taxes in your 70s. You can potentially reduce how much of your future Social Security becomes taxable. And in some cases, even avoid higher Medicare IRMA surcharges later on. That combination can easily be worth tens of thousands of dollars over retirement. When you choose to claim at 62 by default, you may be shrinking that planning window without even realizing it. And the crazy part most people don't get is that the tax bill for that decision doesn't always show up right away. It often shows up 10 to 20 years later in the form of higher taxes, bigger required minimum distributions, and less flexibility. That's why I keep coming back to this point. Claiming early isn't automatically wrong. Claiming early without understanding how it affects your tax window That's where people miss out and make big mistakes. So if you're a federal employee within about 5 to 10 years of retirement and you want to actually see how this plays out for your situation, click the link below the video to get your free federal retirement blueprint, and we'll help you get an idea of where you stand for retirement. And if you're not ready for that, no problem. I'd encourage you to watch this video right here, where I go through an actual case study of a federal employee in their early 60s and walk through exactly how much they can spend in retirement. So click here to watch, and I'll see you over there.